"I am not worth much, but I'll spread my legs for a warm bed," she said to the lone cowboy. The sun had just begun its slow descent behind the jagged peaks of the crimson wastes, casting long, dusty shadows across the barren land. The wind whipped the red sand into small whirlwinds that danced across the desert floor. It was quiet here, too quiet, but that was exactly why Jace, the lone cowboy, liked it. Silence was his companion, and the emptiness of the wasteland was safer than the crowded towns he had long since abandoned. Jace rode his old mechanical steed, a hybrid of man-made tech and scavenged machinery, over the shifting dunes. Its gears groaned with each step, but it was loyal, much like Jace himself. He adjusted the worn leather strap across his chest, securing a small pack with his most valuable belongings: a flask of water, some preserved food, a few tools, and a weathered journal he rarely opened. He didn't need much. The desert demanded only vigilance and patience. He had been alone for months, wandering the crimson wastes, avoiding raiders, scavengers, and the wild predators that prowled the red sands at night. The planet's twin moons would rise soon, their pale glow illuminating the empty stretches where no one else dared travel. But tonight, Jace felt something he hadn't in a long time: the faint tug of curiosity. Something, or someone, was approaching. From the distance, a figure appeared, hunched against the wind. At first, Jace thought it was another tumbleweed, but as the figure drew closer, he saw it was a woman. She moved slowly, stumbling over the uneven ground, her clothes ragged and a small pack strapped to her back. Her hair was tangled, dust covering her face, but there was determination in her eyes. Jace slowed his steed, keeping his hand near the hilt of his energy pistol. He didn't want trouble, but in these parts, strangers could be dangerous. The woman noticed him too. "Please." "Wait," she called, her voice trembling. I just need shelter tonight." Jace studied her carefully. There was something fragile about her, but not weak. There was fear, yes, but also courage. She didn't plead for mercy, she only sought safety. "Shelter?" he asked, his voice low, careful. "Out here? There's nothing but sand and rocks for miles." "I know," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm not worth much, and I have nowhere else to go." She swallowed hard, her gaze falling to the sand. I'll follow your rules. I just need a place to rest." Jace studied her, sensing honesty in her words. Desperation didn't always come with lies. Slowly, he nodded. "All right, but keep your distance. One wrong move, and we both end up dead in this wasteland." She nodded quickly, relief flooding her face. Thank you so much." She hurried to fall in line behind him, and together they traveled further into the crimson wastes. The woman didn't introduce herself, and Jace didn't press. Names had little importance here. What mattered was survival. The wind picked up, carrying grains of red sand that stung their skin. Jace raised a hand to shield his eyes and glanced back. She was struggling, her steps uneven, but she didn't complain. That kind of resilience was rare. He allowed himself a small measure of respect for her. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply. The desert, which had been scorching under the day's sun, became a cold, unforgiving landscape. Jace found a small alcove of rock formations that would provide some protection from the wind. He dismounted and gestured for the woman to do the same. "This will do for tonight," he said, his voice steady. He set down his pack and began to assemble a small energy heater, a device salvaged from an abandoned mining colony. It hummed to life, emitting a soft warmth that contrasted the cold night air. The woman sat quietly nearby, pulling her tattered cloak closer around her shoulders. I I don't know what I would have done if I didn't see you, she admitted softly. You would have found a way, Jace replied without looking at her. People always do. She glanced at him, surprised by the honesty in his words. But I've failed so many times.
Hmm.
Every place I tried, every plan I made, it fell apart. I thought, I thought I was worthless. Jace finally looked at her, his piercing eyes reflecting the pale light of the heater. Worthless? Maybe that's what you think. But that's not about what you've done. It's about what you do next. Right now, you're here. You didn't give up. That counts for something. Her eyes glistened, not with tears of sadness, but with the faint spark of hope. I never thought anyone would say that to me. Jace shrugged, his expression unreadable. People say a lot of things. Actions matter more than words. Just survive the night. We'll see what tomorrow brings. She nodded silently. For a long while, neither spoke. The wind howled, carrying distant cries of alien creatures echoing across the dunes. The woman listened to the strange sounds, a mix of fear and fascination in her gaze. Jace, ever vigilant, kept watch, scanning the darkness beyond the rocky alcove. Hours passed, and exhaustion finally claimed her. She curled up on a makeshift bed of scavenged cloth and blankets, the warmth from the heater easing the chill from her bones. Jace remained seated nearby, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his weapon, listening, watching, guarding. Sleep was fragile here. Every shadow could hide danger. But tonight, in the small shelter between the rocks, there was a moment of peace. For the first time in many months, Jace felt the faint sense of companionship. When the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, painting the sky in soft shades of orange and pink, the woman stirred. She looked at Jace, a quiet question in her eyes. You stay out here all alone? She asked, voice filled with curiosity and a hint of disbelief. Someone has to, he replied, a small, wry smile forming. Out here, there's no one else, just the sand, the wind, and whatever wants to kill you before breakfast. She chuckled softly, the sound almost foreign in this harsh world. I don't know how you do it. I couldn't survive out here alone. You'd be surprised, Jay said, standing and stretching. People have more strength than they think. You're already stronger than you realize. You walked all night in this wasteland. That's no small feat. The woman nodded, a spark of determination in her eyes. Then, I guess I'll try to learn. From you? Jace studied her, the corner of his mouth lifting slightly. He didn't offer to teach. Not yet. Lessons in the desert were harsh, and survival demanded patience. But he sensed potential in her. Potential to endure. Potential to become more than she thought she was. As the sun rose higher, casting the crimson wastes in its harsh light, Jace and the woman prepared to continue their journey. The desert stretched endlessly before them, full of unknown dangers and hidden wonders. But for the first time in a long time, Jace didn't feel entirely alone. And for the woman, the thought of hope, faint and fragile, felt like the warmest shelter she had ever known. The journey ahead would be long, and challenges would come. But tonight had proven one truth. Even in a barren wasteland, human connection, courage, and determination could kindle the smallest light of hope, and that light could be enough to survive the longest night. With that unspoken understanding, the lone cowboy mounted his mechanical steed, and the woman followed suit, a for sure respective hub. Together they rode into the heart of the crimson wastes, two souls seeking safety, shelter, and the promise of something more than mere survival. The morning sun burned brightly over the crimson wastes, its rays bouncing off the red sand and jagged rock formations. The wind was calmer than last night, but the desert was still an unforgiving place. Jace adjusted the strap on his mechanical steed and glanced back at the woman riding behind him. She seemed tense, gripping her pack tightly, her eyes scanning the horizon as if expecting danger at every moment. "You'll get used to it," Jace said, without turning his head. "The desert tests everyone. If you panic, you die. If you learn, you survive." She swallowed nervously, nodding. I hope I can learn fast enough." Jace smirked slightly. "Fast enough is just a matter of staying alive. The desert will teach you things you never thought you could handle." The two moved in silence for hours, their mechanical steeds crunching across the dry sand. The woman's breathing was steady, but she occasionally glanced down at the map she had drawn from memory. It was crude and incomplete, but it was better than nothing. Jace had traveled this wasteland many times before, relying on instinct, experience, and a careful reading of the landscape. He didn't need maps. As the sun reached its peak, the heat became unbearable. The wind carried grains of sand that stung their skin and burned their eyes. The woman wiped her face with the edge of her cloak, her movements clumsy but determined. "Take a break," Jace finally said, dismounting. He reached into his pack and pulled out a small, collapsible water container. He handed it to her. "Drink. We need energy if we're going to make it through this stretch." She hesitated for a moment, then drank greedily, gulping down the water as though she had not had any for days. When she finally lowered the container, she looked at him with gratitude. "Thank you. I don't know how I would have lasted this long without it." "You'd find a way," Jace said, tightening his grip on the reins. "People do, whether they think they can or not." They rested for only a short while, for time was precious in the desert. Jace led them toward a series of rocky cliffs in the distance. He knew there were small caves there, perfect for shelter during the day. They reached the cliffs as the sun was beginning its slow descent, and the woman looked at the jagged rocks with awe. "It looks dangerous," she said. "I don't know if I can climb that." "Dangerous is the desert's middle name," Jace said, a dry smile on his face. "You'll manage. Keep your eyes open, feet steady, and your head clear. That's all it takes." She nodded, taking cautious steps toward the cliff face. Jace followed at a measured pace, scanning the surroundings for movement. The desert had predators, and not all of them were human. Shadows shifted between the rocks, and the wind carried the faint, haunting cries of creatures Jace had learned to avoid. Halfway up the first incline, a woman stumbled, catching herself on a protruding rock. She cursed softly, frustration mixing with fear. I can't do this," she whispered, her voice trembling. Jace stopped and extended a hand. "Yes, you can. You're stronger than you think, one step at a time. Focus on what's under your feet, not the distance ahead." She took a deep breath, gripping his hand, and allowed him to guide her up. Step by step she followed, slowly gaining confidence. When they finally reached the top, she collapsed on the flat rock surface, gasping for air. I made it," she said, a small, triumphant smile forming despite her exhaustion. "See?" Jay said, sitting beside her. "That's how you survive." You push through, one step at a time. The sun was beginning to set, casting the desert in deep orange and red hues. The wind had picked up again, colder this time, signaling the coming night. Jace led them to a small cave hidden behind a rocky outcrop. It wasn't much, but it would provide protection from the elements. Inside the cave, he set up the energy heater again, and the woman arranged her blanket as best she could. She sat silently for a moment, staring at the wall of the cave, lost in thought. "You seem tough?" she said quietly after a long pause. "I mean, you've been out here alone all this time." "How do you do it?" Jay shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "You get used to it. The desert doesn't care about your feelings. You survive or you die. That's all." "But you don't seem lonely," she said softly. "I thought being alone out here would make someone bitter or scared." "I've seen enough of the world to know people can't be counted on," Jace said, his voice low. "Loneliness, it keeps you alert. It keeps you alive, but it also teaches you things: patience, observation, understanding. Sometimes it's better than company." She nodded slowly, trying to absorb his words. "I've never been alone like this. I thought I was worthless. I thought no one would ever care." Jace looked at her, the shadows from the heater flickering across his face. "Worth isn't measured by what others think. It's measured by what you do when the world turns its back. You're already proving your worth. By surviving. By coming this far. That's something most people can't even do." She blinked, surprised by the honesty in his words. I didn't think anyone would say that to me." "People usually don't," he said quietly. "That's why you listen to the desert. It tells you the truth. No lies, just survival." The night grew colder and the cave walls seemed to hum with the wind outside. Strange cries echoed from the distance. Creatures hunting, scavengers roaming, dangers unseen. The woman huddled closer to the heater, her thoughts drifting between fear and awe. Jace kept watch by the cave entrance, his eyes scanning the horizon. Even in the safety of the cave, the desert never slept. Hours passed and the woman finally drifted into a restless sleep, comforted only by the warmth and the faint sense of safety beside Jace. At dawn, Jace woke her gently. "We have to move," he said. "The desert doesn't wait, and neither should we." She stretched, brushing sand from her clothes. I think I understand now. You survive by paying attention, by learning, by being smart." "That's it," Jace said. "And by trusting your instincts. Not everything can be planned. Sometimes you have to react. Sometimes you have to trust yourself." The two mounted their mechanical steeds and continued their journey. The desert stretched endlessly before them, dotted with jagged cliffs, deep canyons, and alien flora that seemed almost alive in the harsh light. They rode in silence for hours, but a quiet understanding was growing between them. Trust was forming, fragile but real. By midday, they reached a narrow canyon. Shadows clung to the walls, and the wind carried an unfamiliar scent. Jace slowed, his instincts alert. "Stay close," he whispered. "Something's here." From the shadows, a small pack of scavenger drones, remnants of a long-forgotten miming colony, scuttled into view. They were rusted, unstable, and clearly malfunctioning, but they were fast. And the desert had taught Jace never to underestimate a threat. He reached for his energy pistol and fired a warning shot. The drones skidded back, sparks flying from their joints. The woman's eyes widened in fear, but she didn't panic. Jace noticed and allowed a small smile to form. She was learning. Together, they navigated the canyon, avoiding the drones and using the rocks for cover. By the time they emerged, the woman was breathing hard but smiling. I did it," she said, a spark of pride in her eyes. "You did," Jace said. "And tomorrow you'll do even more." As the sun dipped low again, they found a shallow depression in the sand to rest. The desert night was coming, full of dangers and unknowns, but for the first time the woman felt a glimmer of confidence. She was no longer just a desperate traveler. She was a survivor, learning from one of the best the Crimson Wastes had ever known. And Jace, for the first time in many months, felt a faint sense of partnership. The desert was still harsh, unforgiving, and lonely, but now there was someone to share it with. The night was long, filled with wind, cold, and strange cries from the desert, but neither feared it now. Together they were learning that survival was not just about avoiding death. It was about growing stronger, trusting, and proving one's worth in a world that often measured value in harsh terms. And as the stars appeared twinkling above the endless dunes, the lone cowboy and the determined woman rode forward step by step toward the unknown, toward danger, toward survival, and toward the fragile light of hope that flickered between them. The next morning, the crimson wastes were bathed in a pale, dusty light. The desert seemed calmer than before, but Jace knew better. Peace in these lands was always temporary. He scanned the horizon while the woman packed her small belongings, adjusting her tattered cloak against the chill. "You've improved since yesterday," Jace said, his voice low. "You handled the canyon well." She smiled faintly, brushing sand from her boots. "I'm learning I don't want to fail anymore." "That's good," Jace replied. "The failure out here can mean death, but surviving teaches more than success ever will." They moved slowly, traveling along a narrow ridge overlooking a deep canyon. The wind whistled through the rocks, carrying the faint sound of scraping metal far below. Jace's eyes narrowed. The sound was too regular, too deliberate. Something, or someone, was down there. "Stop," he whispered, holding up a hand. "Something's down there. Be quiet." The woman froze, her eyes wide, ears straining to catch the faint noises. She had been through hardship before, but the desert had already taught her that caution was as important as courage. Jace crept closer to the edge, scanning the canyon floor. His eyes caught movement, a group of scavengers, humanoid figures in ragged clothing, carrying makeshift weapons. They were looting the remains of an abandoned supply depot, remnants of the old colony that had once mined these lands. "Scavengers," Jace muttered. "We can't outrun them in that canyon. We need a plan." The woman glanced at him, fear mixing with determination. "What should we do? We wait, watch, and choose the right moment," he said. "Desert survival isn't about fighting first. It's about knowing when to act." For hours they observed the scavengers from the ridge, noting their numbers, movements, and patterns. The sun climbed high, casting harsh light across the canyon, making shadows sharp and the heat unbearable. The woman felt her throat dry, but she trusted Jace. He had survived this desert alone for years. He knew what he was doing. As evening approached, the scavengers began to leave, carrying their plunder. The desert was silent again, except for the whispering wind. Jace gestured for the woman to follow him down a hidden path that wound along the canyon wall. "You'll learn a lot by watching and listening," he said quietly. "The desert teaches patience, observation, and strategy. Strength isn't always in your hands, it's in your mind." The woman nodded, absorbing every word. I think I understand. I have to think, not just act." "Exactly," Jace replied. "Always think." Night fell quickly, and the temperature dropped sharply. They found a shallow cave halfway down the canyon, offering protection from the cold and wind. Jace set up the heater while the woman gathered small rocks to block the entrance, keeping any wandering creatures out. "You're good at this," he remarked. "Most people would have missed those small gaps. The wind will get through, and you'd freeze." I just watch and follow," she said, glancing down at her hands. "I don't want to fail." "You're not failing," Jay said. You survived the canyon. You're learning fast. Most people wouldn't last an hour out here. They ate a small ration of preserved food, the desert's harshness making each bite feel like a luxury. Silence filled the cave, but it wasn't uncomfortable. There was trust now, fragile but growing, forming an unspoken bond between the two travelers. Hours later, while the woman slept, Jace's mind drifted to his past. Memories of old companions, friends who had trusted him and been lost, surfaced like ghosts in the night. The desert had taught him to survive, but it had also taught him to keep his heart guarded. Trust came slowly, and loss came quickly. Morning arrived with a chill that made the woman shiver as she woke. "I had a strange dream," she said, rubbing her eyes. "It felt like someone was calling me." Jace frowned, scanning the horizon. Dreams can mean a lot out here. Sometimes they're just your mind playing tricks. Other times they're warnings? She hesitated, then spoke quietly. "I think it's more than that. I don't know. But I feel like the desert is testing me, showing me what I need to face." Jace nodded slowly. The desert doesn't lie. If you're scared, it's showing you what to overcome. Face it, and you grow stronger. That night, as they set up a small heater in the outpost, the woman asked, "Jace, why do you help me? You could just leave me out here." He looked at her, the firelight casting shadows across his face. "'Cause you're trying. You haven't given up. That counts for more than most people do. And maybe because I see a little of what I used to be in you." She nodded, processing his words. For the first time, she didn't feel worthless. She felt capable, resilient, and ready to face whatever the desert threw at her. The desert night was harsh, full of strange noises and distant howls, but neither of them feared it now. They were learning together, growing stronger with each step, each challenge, each moment of survival. By the next morning, a new storm was approaching. Dark clouds gathered in the sky, and the wind began to howl with a fury that promised danger. Jace glanced at the horizon, his face serious. "We'll need to move fast. This storm could bury everything if we're caught in the open." The woman nodded, determination in her eyes. "I'm ready. Let's go." As the first drops of rain fell, the two mounted their mechanical steeds once again. The storm roared behind them, and the desert stretched endlessly ahead, full of unknown threats, hidden dangers, and challenges yet to come. But they were no longer strangers. They were companions, survivors, and learners. And together, they would face whatever the crimson wastes threw at them, because in this harsh, unforgiving world, human courage, trust, and resilience were the greatest weapons of all. The storm had passed, leaving the crimson wastes bathed in a cold, gray light. The desert was transformed. Dunes shifted, sand hardened in ridges, and small pools of water reflected the pale sky. The wind was calmer, but the air carried a sharp electric chill, a reminder of the storm's power. Jace adjusted the strap on his mechanical steed, checking the gears that had been strained during the storm. The woman followed suit, her hands trembling slightly as she wiped mud from her boots. She had survived the storm, but she felt every bit of the desert's might pressing against her. "Today won't be easy," Jace said quietly, scanning the horizon. The storm changed the terrain. There are crevices, sinkholes, and weakened rock formations everywhere. One wrong step and we could be trapped, or worse. She nodded, determination hardening in her eyes. "I'm ready. I've learned enough to handle it, haven't I?" "You've learned a lot," Jace admitted, his voice serious. "But knowledge isn't enough. You'll need courage, patience, and trust in yourself. They began their trek, moving cautiously over the storm-altered landscape. The desert seemed alive with new threats. Sharp rocks protruded from the sand, hidden puddles of corrosive water, and alien plants that had been stirred by the storm into aggressive, twisting shapes. Each step was deliberate, careful. After hours of tense travel, they reached a narrow canyon leading to a plateau that overlooked the far edge of the crimson wastes. Jace's eyes narrowed as he spotted something unusual, a deep fissure in the rocks, widened by the storm, forming a natural trap. Beyond it lay the plateau, their intended route forward. "This is it," Jace said, dismounting. "We have to cross carefully. One mistake, and we fall into that fissure. The wind could push us off balance, the rocks could crumble. Stay alert." The woman's heart raced, but she squared her shoulders. "I can do this. I will do this." Step by step, they navigated the jagged path. Jace led, testing each rock, listening to the subtle cracks beneath his feet. She followed closely, her eyes fixed on him, her breathing steady despite the fear that tightened her chest. Halfway across, a rock beneath her shifted. She stumbled, her foot sliding toward the fissure. Instinctively, Jace grabbed her arm, steadying her. "Trust your steps," he said, his voice firm. "Don't panic. Focus on the next move, not the danger behind it." She nodded, taking a deep breath, and moved carefully forward, finding solid footing. When they reached the plateau, she exhaled in relief, a small, victorious smile forming. I did it." "You did," Jace said quietly. "And that's what counts. The desert doesn't care about fear. It cares about action." On the plateau, the landscape opened into a wide valley dotted with alien flora and the remnants of old settlements. But the storm had brought new hazards, landslides, deep cracks, and rogue scavengers drawn to fallen structures. Jace scanned the area carefully. "We need to find shelter before night," he said. "There's an old mining facility in the valley. It's unstable, but it will provide cover from the wind and cold." They descended into the valley, moving cautiously. The woman noticed strange, almost glowing plants that had been disturbed by the storm. Their leaves curled aggressively in the wind, and some released spores that irritated the skin. She learned quickly to step lightly, avoiding them, mimicking Jace's careful movements. Hours later, they reached the mining facility. Its walls were rusted, and parts of the roof had collapsed, but it offered enough protection to rest. Jace inspected the entrance and signaled for her to enter. Inside, she explored carefully. The facility smelled of metal and dust, and the floor was littered with debris. She noticed a section of the wall that looked weak. "Jace, this might not hold for long. We need to reinforce it." "Good eye," Jace said, impressed. "Use those rocks over there. We'll stack them to support the wall." Every bit counts. Working together, they reinforced the weakened structure. The woman lifted heavy stones with determination, proving her growing strength. Jace guided her, but she executed each action with confidence. For the first time, she wasn't just following, she was leading, contributing fully. By the time the wall was secure, night had fallen. The desert outside howled, but the facility provided a small haven. They lit a compact energy heater, and for the first time the woman allowed herself to relax fully. "Jace," she said softly, "I feel stronger. I'm not just surviving anymore. I feel like I belong here, like I can actually make it." Jace nodded, a rare warmth in his eyes. "You've earned it. The desert doesn't give mercy, it gives opportunity. And you took it." She smiled, feeling a surge of pride and hope. "Thank you for trusting me, for letting me come this far." "Trust is earned," Jace said. And you've earned mine. Don't forget that. Survival isn't about luck. It's about action, courage, and the decisions you make. The night passed with relative calm. Outside, the wind screamed and distant creatures prowled, but inside, the two shared a silent understanding. They were partners now, learning from each other, facing danger together, and growing stronger for it. Morning came with a chill, the desert pale and unforgiving. Jace and the woman prepared to move again. Their destination was clear, a larger settlement rumored to have fresh water, food, and technology that could aid them. But to reach it, they would have to cross the Dead Zone, a stretch of desert where storms had caused massive sand shifts, creating treacherous terrain. "This is the ultimate test," Jay said, scanning the horizon. "The Dead Zone will challenge every skill you've learned, every lesson, every step, every decision matters. Are you ready?" She nodded firmly. "I am." "I won't fail." They entered the Dead Zone, the sand shifting beneath their steeds, making every movement a test of balance and strategy. Cracks opened suddenly, and unstable rocks threatened to collapse under their weight. The woman kept her focus, following Jace's lead, her confidence growing with each successful step. At one point, a section of the ground gave way beneath her. Without thinking, she leapt, landing safely on solid sand, heart racing. Jace's eyes narrowed, impressed. "Good reflexes. That's what will keep you alive out here." Hours passed, and the Dead Zone tested them relentlessly. The woman faced moments of fear, exhaustion, and doubt, but she persevered. Each challenge she overcame strengthened her resolve. She was no longer the desperate traveler who had first met Jace. She was a survivor, resilient and capable. Finally, as the sun dipped low, they reached the far edge of the Dead Zone. The desert stretched ahead, calmer now, and the faint signs of civilization appeared on the horizon. A small settlement, smoke rising from chimneys, and the faint glimmer of water reflecting the last light of day. "We made it," the woman whispered, disbelief and triumph in her voice. Jace nodded, a rare smile crossing his face. "We did. You made it. And more importantly, you proved yourself. You're strong, capable, and determined. That's what counts out here." She looked at him, gratitude and admiration shining in her eyes. "I couldn't have done it without you." "You did most of it yourself," Jace replied. "I just showed you the path. You walked it. That's what matters." As they approached the settlement, the woman realized something profound. She was no longer just surviving. She was learning, growing, and discovering her worth, not through words, but through actions, courage, and resilience. And Jace, for the first time in a long while, felt a quiet satisfaction. The desert had tested them both, pushed them to their limits, and shown that even in the harshest conditions, humans could endure, grow, and thrive. Together, they crossed the threshold into the settlement, ready for whatever the future held. They were no longer strangers. They were survivors, partners, and proof that courage and determination could overcome even the cruelest trials of the Crimson Wastes. And as the settlement lights flickered in the distance, the woman felt a warmth she had never known. Hope. A hope that she was worth something, that she could endure, and that the harsh desert could not break her spirit. Because survival wasn't just about living, it was about proving one's humanity, strength, and resilience in the face of relentless adversity.